everybody. This is 19 to the dozen, and we kick off season 2 with a very special guest, the German mayor of my hometown, Timisoara. Thank you very much, Dominic, for being here. I really appreciate it. I know you're on a tight schedule, so...
Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to your podcast. I have to admit I haven't watched your previous episodes of season 1, but I'm proud to be the opener for season 2.
Yeah. So I thought about how to open this conversation, and I'm obviously going to open it from immigrant to immigrant, right? Because I moved out of Timisoara when you came back, more or less. So my first question for you would be, give me some reasons for which I should be coming back from Prague, given that the fact that I've been living in Prague for the last 10 years.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I have to correct you with a slight nuance that is important. I didn't come back at any time because I wasn't born here. I wasn't raised here. So the first time I came to Timisoara, I was 19 years old. I volunteered for a year in an orphanage. I went back to Germany. And then I kept coming back from that first year but it wasn't like my family is not from here, so it's indeed I'm a true immigrant if you want it that way. I think there's this question that you're asking. I think many Timisoarans who have left are asking themselves, and I'm working actually with a few of them who took the decision to come back, and one of them is Valmu Reșanu, who was a very successful IT entrepreneur who was in Dublin, founded a very famous startup, sold the startup, and then came back, I think, to be the country manager of Intel. Okay. And now he's my personal advisor on digitization. So I think there are many stories of Romanians who left the country, but who still feel that they're very attached. Maybe not so much to the country, but really to the city. And Timisoara is a city where kind of you never lose touch with it, and there's always this element of dor, as Romanians say, of homesickness and of kind of this wanting to be in touch with it. So many people have taken this decision already in the past years, and Timisoara is thriving. We don't have any unemployment. There are big multinational corporations who have big parts, especially of their research and development or software development divisions here in Timisoara, and so it's a really international atmosphere, and many Timisoarans come back. And I think the reasons for that are several. On the one hand, and maybe my first answer is really personal. I lived in Berlin before. I also lived in other places, but right before moving to Timisoara in 2019, after kind of having commuted between Timisoara and wherever I lived in the world in the decade before. I had lived in Berlin. I had a very good job with the German government and lots of stability. And but even Berlin, which is known, as this very creative and vibrant city, even there I felt, there's just a little bit too much of stability and kind of satisfaction of things being in order. Okay. And even in the creative part, I always felt that in Berlin, any creative idea that you might have, doing a podcast with expats or whatever, there are already 10 people who already had the same idea. I don't know, you want a bar with I don't know, toilet seats at the wall. There are already 3 bars with toilet seats on the wall. So I felt that it kind of in Germany, life had reached this very stable and almost boring state. And Romania is different, and Timisoara is different. The future is still in the open. It's very vibrant. It's very dynamic. Things are changing quickly. there's lots of uncertainty. This is the bad part, and it adds a lot of pressure on society. But this uncertainty also gives way to lots of creativity, to new ideas, and to the possibility to impact something, to really make a change. And this was a big motive for me to get involved in politics in Romania. And I think this is a big motive for many Romanians thinking about coming back. Here they really can make an impact. And whatever their idea is, whatever their contribution is, here they can still make things happen. And their presence really counts. They're not just an anonymous immigrant, somewhere in Prague or in Berlin, but they, with all their experience from living abroad, they can come back and really mark the path that the society is taking. So these are kind of, I think, the more psychological reasons. Obviously, there are also reasons about the city. I mean, we're really in a phase of good economic development. The economic crisis still hasn't hit. And I think we're a pretty resilient economy, local economy here. We will be capital of culture next year. And this will be really, I think, a game changer for not just for Timisoara, but for the whole of Romania, and will bring a lot of creativity and enthusiasm to the city. So I think it's a good moment to return, and we're really welcoming all kinds of people who were born in Timisoara and who left to come back, but also other nationalities. We're now working on a smart city strategy, and the very heart of the strategy is really to make Timisoara attractive for talents in all kinds of sectors. And we really know that we have to work hard and harder on the quality of life, which is already great. But we know that this is what we have to do to attract more and more people. And I'm pretty sure that more and more people will move to Timisoara.
I am almost convinced, Dominic. Thank you very much. I mean, it's such a generous answer. And indeed, partially, I mean, totally, I agree with you. Partially, it's kind of, I fell in love with Prague as much as I love my hometown. So it's kind of that rupture somehow. But yes, I mean, yeah. Now, since you mentioned that you were born and raised in Germany, if you could snap your fingers and bring something from Germany that you feel is missing in Timisoara, what would that be?
This is a trap question, because it's obviously there are a few things that come to my mind, but I really want to underline that I don't see myself as somebody bringing, I don't know, Germanness to Timisoara, because I don't think this is what the city needs. And there's, the potential of the city is so big that, we don't need Germany to teach us what's to do. Nonetheless, of course, there are several things that I believe that Timisoara is striving to achieve and is really ambitious about. And one thing is really a modern mobility system, and the way that you can use other things than your own car to get from A to B within the city. This is, I think, something that we really want, we really need. We have a good basis for doing that. And where we really get inspiration from cities in Germany, but also in other countries. So we need a better bike infrastructure. We need a safer space for pedestrians. We need a modern public transportation system where you can kind of change seamlessly between different modes of transport. I think digitalization is great here. So this is definitely something that I think Timisoara wants for itself. And then obviously as a German, there's always kind of the obvious answer when it comes to, I don't know, punctuality. Then obviously sometimes I wish that I'm really trying to, I'm not the perfect German, and I also come late, but I'm really trying to have an agenda and to stick to it. And my agenda usually is really full from the morning to the evening. And I think this was for many people, it was kind of a shock that they couldn't just walk into the city hall and say, I want to speak with the mayor, even if they're important. But especially when they're important, they should make an appointment so that I can prepare a bit for meeting them.
They've been probably used in the wrong way. I mean, used to.
I think they're really a lot of. I feel that many people don't really have a very clear schedule, and kind of their daily priorities float according to who is calling, what messages you get, and it is very this is not Romanian. This is I think universal in our times with our phones everywhere. That you don't have your priorities set by yourselves, but by other people. So this is something I'm struggling with my team and also myself. It's so easy to get a WhatsApp and with some problem, and then you start solving that problem, and you forget that this day was about solving other problems. But I'm not sure whether nowadays Germans are so much better in being punctual and not letting social media and cell phones destroy all kinds of planning.
Fair enough. Thank you for that as well. I know you're a recent father, right? So one of the questions is, I'm looking forward to be a father. I hope it will happen to me soon as well. I just want to know if fatherhood changed you in any way. And as a follow-up question, my father always told me that I was a kind of a bad baby. I was crying all the time. So there was little sleep that he could put in at times because of me. So the follow-up question would be, after one of those nights in which you kind of lose sleep, how does it feel to make the 9 o'clock city council meeting? I mean,
well, my city council meetings, I put them at 5 o'clock in the evening, so
okay.
I usually recover by then. No, luckily my daughter is very generous, and kind of I've tried to raise her. Me and my wife, we've tried to teach her she's 8 months now, and we've tried to convey to her in any way we can that it's really important to sleep a lot, and especially at night. And luckily, she's very cooperative, so I don't really complain. And then obviously, there are always the days where you just need to get by with some adrenaline. And as a politician, I think this is one of the skills that you need to have. Angela Merkel is famous for being able to negotiate until 4 o'clock in the morning and then get up at 7 and let's solve the next problems. And about how fatherhood changed me, first of all, I think it's a great. It's always a blessing and a privilege to really go again through the stages of the development of a human being, because obviously we don't remember how it was, and being a father, I've 12 nieces and nephews, and I've 7 brothers and sisters, so it's not like I'm not used to being around babies. But the really special thing is that it's really constant, and every day you discover something new, and the baby gets to learn something new, and it really reminds you of how wonderful and miraculous we human beings are, and how hard it has been to be able to talk to each other, to walk, to this is really something you have to build up from the first day, and you have to struggle to do it. So this is, I think, being a parent really makes you understand humanity better. And then obviously it gives you a lot of energy for your work, especially when you're a politician. I think, it really reminds you why you're doing this, because life for me would definitely be easier in any other job. I think in about any other job than being mayor or being a politician, very visible and lots of expectation, lots of fights and lots of attacks, because the decisions you take are also, there are also people who lose access to power and to resources, and especially when you're an anti-corruption politician, there's a price to pay. And then obviously when you have a child, you know why you're paying that price and why you're doing that sacrifice, and because you want your child to grow up in another world, and you want to grow up, in this case, you know, I want my child, my daughter, to grow up in a city that is you know, really fulfilling its potential. Yeah, it's something I recommend. But then on the other hand, I feel, you know, the fact that the human race is still existing proves that it you know, fatherhood doesn't need to be promoted. It somehow happens, and each generation finds its own sense in it. Yeah, it's definitely, it gives me more energy than it takes from me. Coming also back to the question about sleep.
Since you mentioned being an anti-corruption and running on that platform, basically, I have a question. It's more of a let's suppose situation in which you would get 50 of your haters from all the platforms, right? And you would get to spend one day with them. What would you do with them? What would you tell them? Where would you take them in the city? Or, you know, like...
That's an interesting question. So 50 of my haters, and I have to spend one day with them, and I have to show them things.
Yeah. Well, don't get focused on the number. It can be
one.
I know.
Yeah,
doesn't matter.
I know. Well, I think maybe the first half of the day, indeed, I would spend in the city hall, and you know, all the documents that I have to sign, and explain how difficult it is to really make change happen, and things that seem easy and are really hard if you don't have the instruments to achieve them. And sometimes we first have to build the tool until we can repair something. And so, you know, many people wonder, I don't know, if they see you know, they see a road in a bad condition, or they see a park that is not cared for as it should be, and so on. And you know, you walk through the city, or some citizens, and then they are like, you know, why doesn't the mayor see this? Why doesn't the mayor know this? Why doesn't he solve the problem? And in 95% of the cases, I know of the problem. But on the one hand, obviously resources are limited.
Okay.
And you cannot, you know, if I could make Timisoara look like Munich tomorrow, I would do it. It's not like I don't know the difference. But then, you know, resources are limited, and we're investing a lot in infrastructure, in public spaces, but it's still not enough. But then also, on the other hand, I think what I would try to show is, you know, that to have a visible result, there's really a whole chain of decisions and contracts and bureaucratic procedures, and at each point in this chain, you know, there are stumbling blocks, and unfortunately, public administration in Romania is not very functional, and it's, you know, you have at many points in this chain, you have you know, dysfunctional procedures, you have contracts that are very badly made. Sometimes you have public servants who are not prepared to do their job. If you try to change them, you know, they win in court, as it has happened to me several times. You know, after I've tried to change a person who was not living up to expectations, you know, they go to court, and the court basically gives them the right to come back. Sometimes even, you know, that the person is corrupt, and you're forced to work with them. So I think many people don't see, you know, how the sausage is made, and so they don't understand why it has this taste or another taste. And so definitely the first half of the day, I would take them into kind of the factory of public administration, and show them really how complicated things can get. But then on the other hand, you know, I haven't come to complain, but I have promised to, you know, to clean up the factory. So in the second half of the day, I would take them to places and explain to them what my vision is for these places and what projects we're working on. We're here in a cinema that I have opened a couple of weeks ago, and we're working on. This hasn't been functioning for 30 years or something, and we have several old cinemas in Timisoara that we're refurbishing and bringing them back to life. I would show them, some of our plans for some poorer neighborhoods where we are working on new infrastructure projects. And so this city has so much potential. It has so much potential. And all we need is really a public administration that is able to bring that potential to life. And so I would take them to many of these places where either it's already happening, like here, or where we have really great plans for the future.
My mom lives a few streets away. I've been here 30 years ago.
Wow.
And we were watching cartoons,
Okay.
on the screen. So it really, thank you for accepting us to be here and to film here. I've never been in a cinema hall that smells so new, actually. It really does. But talking about infrastructure, I love Poli Timisoara. I grew up with the team and so on. And I'm not going to ask why other cities, city halls can fund the football teams in their local football teams. But I'm going to ask about the sports infrastructure and the stadium. I know the stadium belongs to the council of the Consiliul Județean, county council. Yes, I know that. But will we ever see football in Timisoara? Or we just have to, give up that hope and just ride bikes?
No, we definitely will see football. I mean, the question why, other cities can directly fund football clubs is an important one. And there has been a criminal investigation and that has ended with the conviction of one of the former mayors and parts of his team. A conviction that doesn't convince me, to be honest, and that I have many questions about. But that's another topic. But I agree with you that our responsibility maybe isn't really to finance sport clubs, but it definitely is to put into place a good infrastructure for sports. And this is something where we missed decades of important investments, and it's really tragic. If we have, sadly, right now we don't have a football club that is in the first league, but should Poli Timisoara, for example, our most famous football club, should it get into the first league, then
they wouldn't be able
to play in Timisoara, which is a tragedy. So there are several things that we're doing. First of all, and I'm talking now just about football, but we could, if we had more time, we could talk about all kinds of sports infrastructure. But first of all, really, it's important that the big stadium that is old and where there is a project and the government has said for years that they will build us a new one, that this is really going to happen. I know that they're now working on the documentation, on the technical project. And so I really hope that the current government will, at the end, also do a tender and sign a contract finally for building this new stadium. It's going to be really, really expensive. So right now, in this current climate of economic crisis, all the excuses are there for the government to say they won't do it right now, but we really need to do this. And I'm always saying, all the political differences, aside, let's all, disregarding of what party we're from, all the politicians from Timisoara and from Timiș County should really pull into that direction. And we have some very important politicians from here who are also serving in the government. And obviously my expectation is that they're supporting this. Secondly, I don't want to rely just on the government for this part. So we have right now, there is a tender going on for a smaller stadium on city grounds, paid for by the city. It will cost us I don't know, between 20 and 30 million euros. I still don't know where to take the money from. But this is a priority, and I think we should do it. It's in the south east of the city, and it will be with around 9,000 seats. So if everything goes well, this could be finished in about 2 or 3 years maximum. And then thirdly, obviously, until these 2 or 3 years, I'm in good contact with the different football clubs, and just to have a look at the current infrastructure and the current stadiums or smaller stadiums to see what improvements we can make, at least to offer good training conditions, and also for smaller games to offer the best conditions. And this is also what we're doing. So it's definitely a priority, but it's one of these things that nothing will change overnight. But I think we're on track, so that one day the football scene of Timisoara will be great again.
Hopefully. Cool. I came back from Prague during the 2020, I think it was the first wave of COVID. And I remember the uncertainty and everything else, right? So my next question would kind of be taking you there. How difficult was it to take decisions which were backed by science and yet unpopular to people? And if you would be able to go back, would you change anything, or would you still do the same thing?
I think for me, the difficult part in the pandemic wasn't that much to take these decisions, or hard decisions, decisions that I knew hurt people and the city, and especially when it comes to closing down schools. I mean, this is painful, both for the children and for the parents. Also, we had to quarantine the city for a period of a few weeks. But the difficult part is, first of all, I didn't have any power to take those decisions on my own. So it's a cascade of decisions, by the government, by different institutions on the county level, by the city, that in different formats take different decisions on different levels, which at the end, although each decision might have its logic, were not always correlated, and were then at the end, for the citizens who doesn't care whether the government or the mayor or the county or whoever took a certain decision, for him the result counts. But at the end, for the citizens, it wasn't always obvious why certain restrictions were in place, or how they were, correlated. If you close down an open air market, but the supermarkets are open, what is really the logic behind that? And so that was I think one part of the difficulty was to make sense of the wholeness of decisions, where my own decisions were only parts of them, but I still, that's a responsibility that I felt, as a representative of the decision makers. I still tried to bring some logic into the whole of it, and that wasn't always possible. And then I think the second part that was difficult was that in these times, and I think each country had went through its own experience, but in Romania particularly, I felt that very few people actually publicly explained and communicated those decisions and those restrictions. And in Romania, it was extreme. Many people hid behind all kinds of committees and commissions and expert commissions, and so oftentimes, there was just a spokesperson for some committee that nobody really knew. And that was hard. And then I stepped up and said, okay, for example, the local decision to quarantine Timisoara, so to basically close down, to have a local lockdown, that decision was taken by a committee of about 30 people, representing all kinds of local institutions, the fire department and the police and the school department, and 30 people. The only one, and I was one of them, but I was the only one who was a political representative. So I was the only recognizable face. I was the only one who gave interviews about it. And so people obviously assumed that it was me personally who kind of took these decisions. And that was indeed a difficult time, because I had to answer to questions based on decisions that I did not always agree with, that I did not always have a say in. And that certainly I did not take on my own. But then again, this is part of our job. But I was, and I still am, disappointed of how few people that had responsibility back in that time actually had the courage to explain it to people, and were just hiding behind some experts or some committees.
When things get tough for Dominic Fritz, does Dominic Fritz have a special place in Timisoara where he goes to recharge outside his home, like a park, a building, something like that? Do you have a?
Yeah, I do like to take strolls along the Bega River, a little bit outside of Timisoara. Now, I'm not saying exactly the space, because otherwise the citizens will go there in the evening and wait for me to ask you questions. No, I'm not hiding from the citizens. But and then one place now that I'm a father, obviously, is behind the stroller and taking my daughter out for a stroll. And also just anywhere where there's a piano. I'm a piano player, and this is really something that I enjoy to kind of get my mind on other things, and so to play the piano.
I was gonna ask this because from what I've read, you came with one of the first projects when you came in Timisoara was the gospel project.
Yeah.
Right. So then my question is, do you still play the piano? Do you practice? And what's your favorite? Are you in any way more of a jazz fan of an experimental music, or?
Well, I was trained as a classical pianist, but there indeed, with every year of practice that you lose, my fingers are getting more and more stale, and I sometimes I miss the courage to play some of the pieces that I've played. I don't know, Rachmaninoff or whatever. And I'm like, oh my gosh, thinking back to my youth when I was still agile. So right now I'm improvising a lot. I also composed a few pieces for choir, for piano, and so right now when I'm choosing the easy way. So not to play what others have written down, because then I notice where I'm getting it wrong, but just to improvise and to kind of play my own style of music, which is influenced by jazz, by pop, but also by late romantic classical music, and but I do it not on stage. I do it for myself. So. Yeah, but it's definitely a part that I do miss, having more time to make music also with other people. But hopefully there will be a time where maybe the administration will not need me for 10 or 12 hours per day. But right now I'm very much focused on my job as a mayor.
Do you ever have the thought that it would have maybe been better for you to not get involved into this? Does it get so bad in changing the whole system, as you explained what your platform is and so on, and what you're trying to do? Do you get at any time desperate and want to flip the table or something?
Yeah, I mean, obviously every person has moments where you ask yourself, is it really worth it? But I think the real question for me is, am I still able to be true to the values that made me come here and that made me join this very unpopular field and profession, and that made me want to become mayor? Is this still something I believe in? Do I still believe that Timisoara has a great future ahead? Do I still believe that if we get rid of corruption, that if we professionalize public administration, that we will be able to achieve this future and this potential much faster? Do I still believe that, we need cities where everybody is included? Yes, I still believe that, and I still believe it's possible. Am I frustrated that the path towards that ideal is much harder and requires more sacrifice than I would have wished? Yeah, of course. But then again, I think as long as you still believe in what you're doing, I think you get through any kind of crisis.
Last question from my side would be, I guess langos. You've been living in Timisoara for such a long time. Tell me where I can get the best one here.
Okay, I have to admit that I'm not up to date, with all the new langosh places. But I remember when I was a young guy and I was a volunteer back then. I loved to go to Piazza 700, and there was a small, very tiny and maybe even a bit dirty langosh place, but they had the best langosh with not with Nutella but with Finetti. This is I think the Eastern European version of Nutella.
Yes.
I love that.
Yeah. Well, this was it from my side. I will actually want to have a gift from us, and it's a book from Ciprian Popescu. It's called Mile X. He's also an immigrant. He left Caransebeș, he lived in Timisoara, and then he's now in Montreal in Canada. Mm-hmm. I know you speak Romanian as well, so maybe
it would have been difficult to get elected without speaking Romanian. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
That's from us. And if you would like to add anything else or want to say anything.
Well, I just want to say, spread the word about Timisoara. I hope there will be maybe one day a direct flight from Timisoara to Prague. For anybody really looking to get to know a vibrant cultural city with a rich history. The revolution started here. I mean, Timisoara has really a very special vibe and spirit, and we're very excited next year when we will be Europeans' capital of culture to present that to the world. And I hope that as many people as possible will come here for a visit and fall in love with Timisoara.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Woo!
Perfect.
On time, huh?